My name is Carla Estrada and I am in Los Angeles, California. I am currently waiting for the metro bus.
Carla Estrada is on her journey to work in downtown LA. But as an undocumented migrant, her life has been one long journey.
I don't have the luxury of not going to work. I cannot afford not to work. I need to pay rent. I need to take care of my family.
From breaking through the Mexican border with her parents as a child to her daily commute, now alone in the midst of a pandemic, still in search of the American dream.
You know, the life of an undocumented immigrant, I feel absolutely alone in this country. Seriously, like I have no family. I have to take care of myself by myself.
In her video diary, Carla tells us she has asthma and is worried about contracting the virus, but she supports the family, so has little choice but to work.
You know, sometimes I'm just so tired. I just want to leave. I just want to go back, but that's not an option, so we'll see where life takes me.
Across America, undocumented workers live in constant fear of being deported, often forced to operate in the shadows, soliciting work outside stores like this Home Depot near Washington, D.C. Others get permanent jobs, but no one's ever sure what the next day will bring. There are roughly 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. They work, they pay their taxes, but because technically they're illegal, they don't get the same benefits like healthcare and unemployment allowances given to American workers. And yet, in the face of a lethal pandemic, it's those same people putting their lives on the line, doing the jobs deemed essential by the Trump administration, even as their rights are being further eroded. Farm workers are essential because they feed America. About 2/3 of them are undocumented immigrants from Latin America. Many of them, like Paulino Gallegos, living in Florida. Yet he's now fitted with a monitoring device on his ankle after he was picked up and slung in a detention center, even though he'd committed no crime, and US officials had said they wouldn't make arrests during the pandemic. Paulino entered illegally from Mexico 20 years ago and has remained undocumented ever since. Paulino, what's it like living in constant fear that one day you could just be taken away?
¿Cómo es vivir
No, pues es difícil. Es difícil estar pensando en eso, que cualquier rato puedan venir por mí.
Do you feel desperate living in America, or do you have hope?
Yo pienso que sí. Yo tengo esperanza de vivir. Yo estoy al corriente de todo. Yo he hecho mis taxes, mi todo. Yo no tengo problemas con la ley.
His daughter, Aniela, was terrified he'd contract COVID-19 in the detention center where people were packed together with no masks or gloves.
So my entire family was very worried about his health and the fact that he was not with us anymore.
Now he's home and some safety at least again with his family. But the truth is, no one really feels safe.
Hopefully achieve the American dream, man.
Not even this Mexican lawyer in New York, who was himself once undocumented too.
I remember the night that we crossed the border. It was literally running through the border, running through highways, and just not knowing whether we were actually going to survive.
That was 30 years ago. He's since earned a college degree, married an American, and now represents undocumented immigrants in their battle to remain on US soil.
You know, we're seeing this crisis being exploited by this administration for targeting, scapegoating, and ultimately just making sure that he is making the lives of undocumented immigrants as hard as possible.
And why do you think that is? Why is President Trump not lessening his stance and being kinder right now?
2020 is another election year, and immigration and immigrants are an easy target to rile up his base and get him reelected.
Under the cover of COVID-19, Donald Trump has decreed that all immigrants entering from Mexico be refused entry and immediately deported, and asylum hearings have been suspended. The measure's temporary. The fear they'll be extended. It's enough to make people like Carla want to give up and go back home.
My parents crossed this border for me to survive, for me to have a better life, for me not to suffer the way they did, and for that diploma that is right there from UCLA. Sometimes I think I'm like, probably would have been better with them. Who knows?
She's now making masks for frontline workers, but has finally had her application for permanent residency accepted. A chance to see her family beyond the wall with no fear of being able to return.
And Siobhan joins us live now from Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Siobhan.
Well, John, it's not just the undocumented immigrants that we saw in my piece there that are feeling the pain of this shut-down economy. Of course, there are millions of ordinary Americans who have lost their jobs too, like here in the swing state of Pennsylvania that Donald Trump won successfully in 2016. I've been speaking to some of those unemployed folks. You'll hear from them later on in the week. But for now, the stark reality is that 25% of them, a quarter of the people in this state here right now, are claiming unemployment benefits. It's why Donald Trump is coming here later in the week on Thursday, and it's why yesterday he tweeted, "The great people," he said, "of Pennsylvania want their freedom now. They are fully aware of what that entails." He is desperate for this swing state to get open again, to get back up and running, for people to get back to their jobs and for the economy to get rolling. But that exuberance, if you like, is not necessarily felt by his chief infectious diseases expert, Dr. Fauci, who today told a Senate committee, he talked of the dangers of opening up too soon, not just to people's health, to the public health, but also to the long-term impact on the economy. Let's hear what Dr. Fauci had to say.
There is a real risk that you will trigger an outbreak that you may not be able to control, which in fact, paradoxically, will set you back, not only leading to some suffering and death that could be avoided, but could even set you back on the road to trying to get economic recovery, because it would almost turn the clock back.
Ironically, Dr. Fauci there speaking from his home. He's put himself in self-isolation after 2 people have tested positive for coronavirus in the White House. Everybody now wearing those protective face masks, apart from, of course, the vice president and the president himself, leading to accusations of don't do what I say, don't do what I do.
Thanks, Siobhan. Well, earlier I spoke to Jeremy Conine-Dake. He was on the WHO Independent Oversight and Advisory Committee, which oversees the agency's Health Emergencies Programme, and also served as head of the International Ebola Response Task Force for the Obama administration. I asked him first if he thinks there are serious question marks over whether the Chinese have been sufficiently honest about how the outbreak began.
I think it would be helpful to have a scientific investigation into origins, but I think it's also not unusual that we do not know the origins of this. We still do not definitively know the animal reservoir, even for something like Ebola, which is a disease we've known about for 40 years. It's believed to be bats, but that's never been definitively 100% confirmed. It's not unusual that 5 months into this, we would not have a kind of a definitive origin story for this virus either. I think what's difficult at the moment is that question has become so politicized that finding an unbiased scientific answer to that is made a lot more difficult.
Do you think that in America's reaction to all this, both at home and indeed internationally, spells the end of kind of American leadership of the Western world?
Well, I certainly hope not the end, but I think it has certainly damaged American standing in the world, both in terms of our reputation for being able to competently manage some of our own problems. The fact that we have the worst outbreak in the world is and are continuing to be unable to get it under control. I think that does damage the perception of American competence.
Given that you worked for Barack Obama for a couple of years during his administration, what do you think he'd have done differently?
He took a very clear science-based understanding of these kinds of risks, and he would listen to scientists. He would put the science ahead of the political considerations. I think he also would have asked some very simple questions back in January. The simple questions to ask back in January were, looking at Wuhan, could that happen to an American city? The answer was clearly yes, and we've seen that obviously in the way it's played out in New York. And then second, if that were to happen to an American city, are we ready for that? And what should we do to get ready for that? And, 2 very simple, frankly, pretty obvious questions that I think, the Obama administration or any competent administration, I don't think it's an especially partisan thing, would have asked, but this administration failed to.
What does the Ebola outbreak tell us in terms of what we might be having to deal with in terms of time, how long this is going to last?
Well, I think it tells us that we are in for a very long period of difficulty. I think it tells us not to pin too many of our hopes in a rapid medical solution. You know, we didn't have a treatment for Ebola, and at that time there was not yet a vaccine for Ebola during most of that outbreak, but it was still brought under control. I think that tells us that really the best tool we still have right now for COVID is behavioral choices and how people are acting, and minimizing risky behaviors, and that we will probably have to sustain that for quite a long time until some new medical breakthroughs come online.
Yesterday, the US recorded 80,000 deaths. Trump said, "We have met the moment and prevailed." What does that tell you?
I mean, as an American, it's just profoundly depressing to hear an American president call 80,000 deaths a victory. It's not a victory. It's an abject failure. We could have been, I think we were always going to have a difficult challenge here, but we could have looked, if not like South Korea, at least a lot more like Germany. I think what it tells me too is that the president has, he's been out of touch with the nature of the risk and, what the risk means for the future. Throughout this, he has tried to put an unrealistically optimistic spin on what's coming and on what's present. And what that has meant is we are never ready for the next step. We are always behind and always struggling to catch up and always failing to catch up. And I think it means we're going to continue to be in that position until he gets serious.
Jeremy Conondale, thank you very much indeed for talking with us.